My mother-in-law is so terrible that I'm considering breaking up with my boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my Storytimes, send me on Instagram. My mother-in-law has done everything in her power to separate my boyfriend and I. And though she doesn't admit it, she loves it. When my boyfriend and I started dating, we were both really happy, really loving and affectionate. We love to spend time with each other, so our relationship is really well-rounded. In fact, my boyfriend comes to my apartment every single day. Without me asking him, he always just wants to spend time with me. After 3 weeks of dating, we decided we'd meet each other's parents. Even though he was incredibly nervous to meet my parents, they went out of their way to make him feel at home. My parents had invited us over for dinner, and they literally made his favorite foods and even bought his favorite dessert. Needless to say, my parents loved him and he loved my parents. The following week, we met his parents. It went okay, I guess. His parents wanted to take us out to dinner, which was nice. His dad was super charismatic, funny, and made a lot of conversation. His mom hugged me and kissed me, so I thought she was okay. But throughout the dinner, she would kind of look at me and not really say anything. Basically, she only responded when my boyfriend talked. Obviously, I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so I didn't tell my boyfriend anything. Next day, I get a text message from my mother-in-law. She asked me to have lunch with her. Just the two of us. Part 2 is up. My mother-in-law is so terrible that I'm considering breaking up with my boyfriend. Disclaimer, it's not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. She asked me out to have lunch by ourselves. I said yes. During the lunch, she took me to this really fancy restaurant, and she did not tell me that it was so fancy. So I showed up in jeans and a cardigan. As soon as she sees me, she says, "Oh, why didn't you wear a dress?" I told her I didn't realize the restaurant was so fancy, and I apologized. She said it was okay and for me to sit down quickly. By the way, my boyfriend's family has a lot of money, so she's accustomed to the, nicer things in life. Not so bad sitting in that restaurant with my cheap jeans and my cardigan, while everyone else was in dresses and beautiful sandals. We made small talk and it was actually kind of nice. After we ordered, she started asking me questions though. She started asking me how many boyfriends I'd had in the past, what my friends were like, and she even asked me how much money I earned per year. She was clearly trying to find out if I was only interested in her son's money, which no, I'm not. Then she asked me if I wanted to have kids. I mean, this isn't even a conversation that I've had with my boyfriend yet, so to have it with his mom felt just strange. I told her in the future I definitely wanted to have kids, but not anytime soon. That's when she said that's such a shame. I want grandchildren within 2 years. I laughed and told her that her son and I hadn't even spoken about marriage. We hadn't been together very long. When the bill came, of course I offered to pay for it, but she said, "No, darling, that's okay." But when she looked at the bill, she said, "Wow, that's a lot." Mind you, she was the one ordering the expensive drinks. An hour later, I got a text message from my boyfriend. He said his mom came home crying after having lunch with me. She told him that I was rude to her, that I didn't offer to pay. Part 3. My mother-in-law is so terrible that I want to break up with my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. That's when my boyfriend told me that his mom came home crying after she had lunch with me. She said that I didn't offer to pay for the bill and that I was rude to her. Of course, I quickly defended myself and told him that never happened. I did offer to pay for the bill. He told me that I needed to give her some time. So a few days later, I went to their house and apologized to her personally. I told her that I was sorry if I had done anything to offend her. She told me that I just needed to be a little more sensitive. So after that, I did not speak to her at all. But she noticed every time I would go over to their house, she would make comments about my clothes, my hair. On one occasion, she hugged me and grabbed my arm. That's when she said, "Wow, from far away, it looks like you're thin, but you don't feel very thin." I laughed hysterically. Obviously, she wanted to hurt my feelings, but I just thought it was funny. One occasion, she brought up my boyfriend's ex, only to insinuate that I wasn't as pretty as her. I laughed at her comment and didn't say anything. She once came over to my boyfriend's apartment while I was cooking and literally proceeded to take over and judge everything that I was doing. She told me that my food was too plain and that she felt bad for my boyfriend, and that obviously he had lost weight because of how terrible my food was. The last straw was when she told my boyfriend that I was talking to somebody on the phone. I told my boyfriend I was talking to my mom, and she told him that she thought it was a man. I know it's not my boyfriend's fault, but he always sides with her. I'm always at a loss. What should I do?
Am I wrong for forcing my roommate to miss her finals exam that she spent 2 years studying for? Context: I live with a roommate and her 3-year-old child. Roommate is a 4th-year medical student and is really struggling, having to balance with child, intense study workload, chores, and part-time jobs to afford rent, babysitter, and necessities. On the day of the biggest exam of her entire degree, her babysitter canceled last minute. She was absolutely frantic and hysterically called every one of her contacts to help. Of course, she asked me. She has asked me before to babysit, and I always give a stern no. It's not the time that I need to spend, since I'm perfectly fine with swapping around chores, but the principle that I must be responsible for the child for the duration. Example, if the child hurts himself, no matter how badly, it would be on me. And I refuse to take that responsibility for something like that, so I always refuse to babysit. She begged me, and since the journey to her exam center is almost 2 hours and she needed to go now, she just said, "I don't effing care," and just left the house. Frankly, I found this quite disrespectful, as it is trying to push me to babysit without my consent. Right after she left, I grabbed my coat and also left. She was starting her car when she saw me and asked what I was doing. I told her I was going to watch a movie. I lied. I just refused to babysit without consent. Her eyes dropped and I could see the tears forming as she started begging me more to help her. I still explained the same thing, and that it's not the time or effort but the responsibility. She told me she would sign a waiver that states I am 100% not responsible no matter what happens. I am not an expert in law and not sure if such a waiver is even legally enforceable. Even so, it still carries a responsibility risk, so I stand my ground. Eventually, she became quiet and started sobbing while hitting herself. I, as respectably as I can, asked if there's anything I can help with that does not involve babysitting the child. She told me to F off, so I did and actually went to watch a movie. It's been a few weeks and she still absolutely refuses to communicate with me. I do feel pretty bad, since I've seen for the past 2 years we've lived together that she has almost no free time, always sleeps later than me, and wakes up earlier than me to cram in a little bit of extra study. I know the exam meant a lot to her, and missing the exam might jeopardize her entire degree of 4 years. It sucks that her efforts for the past 2 years has gone down the drain, but that's not an excuse to cross my bottom line.
My husband, Jesse, 31, has been bringing home meals that his female coworker, Nellie, cooks for him. Now, I'm not the best cook and Jesse's made it clear, but he still eats what I cook every day. What I noticed with Nellie was that she tends to take every opportunity to point out how weak and tasteless my cooking is. Jesse would say nothing except steer the conversation towards something else they both relate to while I'm sitting there wallowing in my misery thinking about what she just said. Also, she once asked what was another chore I was good at, and Jesse said ironing his suits. She, in response, joked about having him send her a suit of his so he could see how good she is at ironing too. I rolled my eyes hard, but at least Jesse agreed that was weird. Last week, Jesse came home with a new meal she cooked. I told him I already cooked dinner and asked what he was going to do with the meal. He told me he was going to eat it for dinner. Not gonna lie, I was getting a bit irritated and he must have noticed because he said that he promised Nellie he'd eat it for dinner and that she asked him to take a pic of the empty plate later to confirm that he'd actually eaten it. I was baffled. Completely baffled at this. I told him one thing and one thing only. Told him that if he chose to eat Nellie's meal over the dinner that I cooked, then this would be the last time that I cook for him. He started moaning about how I was being unfair and putting him in a rough place. He stalled and didn't give a clear answer until I saw him walk past me later when I set the table and prepared for dinner. That's when he put her meal in the microwave. I felt so awful, I almost cried. I then told him from now on I won't cook for him anymore since he made his choice. I obviously pissed him off because he went off on me calling me childish and pathetic to make this about my ego. I got up from my chair and told him that I owed him nothing and that he made his decision and so did I. He snapped and said that this was ridiculous and that Nellie was just doing a nice thing for him while as my behavior was disgraceful and disgusting. He then went into the bedroom and I rushed after him, but he shouted, "Leave me the fuck alone." He then proceeded to shut the door and hasn't been speaking to me after that. His mom knew about the argument and called begging me to be more patient and not make any decisions I might regret later. She agreed that Nellie was overstepping and firmly believes that she's the problem and so I shouldn't be hard on her son. But my mother-in-law is incredibly biased, meaning in her eyes, her son is the saint who can do no wrong. So that's that. I feel like I overreacted and really messed it up by pushing him like that.
Literally do not even know how to explain this to y'all. We were leaving for a trip and we live in the hood, so we had to protect the only little belongings we had. So since we were gonna leave my MacBook and my iPad while we were gone, I was like, if I was a robber, where would I look first? So I went through my mind trying to hide these things in a place that they would never find them. And I came up with the bright ideas to put them inside the washer. Because I was like, a robber is never gonna go look inside of a washer for a laptop. This dude, being the responsible father he was, put everything to wash right after our trip. And he forgot they were in there. Look, it doesn't even turn on anymore. It's bent like a lace chip. And my iPad is completely shattered.